Thank you for joining my talk. I'm Dan Gardner. I'm one of the founders of a company called Code and Theory. And what we do at Code and Theory is we design products and brands across all platforms. So today I'm going to talk about the challenges we see on how we've been designing for systems and not channels, how channel-focused design is really ineffective and inefficient in today's world. For context, we do a lot of work in publishing. To give some perspective, over the last 3 years, we've been in over 50 newsrooms. So we've seen everything from small organizations to larger organizations. Additionally, we act on behalf of brands to create the storytelling. We manage over 50 million fans across all social channels. So through this type of work, we've gotten a lot of different insights that I'm going to talk about. But first, I'm going to kind of contextualize it a bit. First, population is growing. This is an obvious statement. But if you really think about it, what's interesting is the youthful part of the generation is bigger than it's ever been. And the older generation, it's not that ageist thing anymore where when you design for someone that's older, you go, oh, they don't know what they're doing, so we have to dumb down the experience. They're using the same phones, the same platforms, the same apps that even younger people do. So the spectrum is bigger than ever if you're a brand and trying to communicate. Additionally, if you think about it, the devices and how you access is just out of control. And you're no longer compatible. If you're a startup or you're a brand, every time you do something, things change so rapidly. How do you actually act upon that? And how do you make sure that you're designing on channels that are actually communicating to other channels that are effective in a way where you don't lose the users through that journey? And expectations are higher than ever. So unlike other generations, when people interact with you as a brand, you have to be perfect. If you're not perfect, you're getting bad reviews on platforms, people bounce. If you're not delivering what they want, they find what they want somewhere else. So the expectation is higher than ever. And how do you deliver on that? And startups, there's new companies all the time. The propensity of startups or just business in general to solve user problems are insane now. So how do you deal with that when competition is just, the spectrum is so high? And even traditional channels of competition are blurry. If you're a newspaper, you're competing now with TV stations. If you're a CPG brand, you're trying to get your message out and communicate ways that everybody else is doing the same channels. You're even competing with newspapers if you're a CPG brand. So how do you deal with that? So if you look at an example, let's think about the cable industry. Think about the change that they're going through. It used to be a very simple model where you bundled up all different kinds of content. It's a one method of payment, but now you're having unbundled content like you've never seen before, like HBO Now, for example. So the distribution is changing. The payment structure is changing. How you interact, how advertisers get their message out. It's no longer you can just put a spot and blast it out, because even if you're going for that broad reach of communication on an advertisement, now it's going on over the top, so you have a two-way communication that was different in past generations. So how do you respond to this rapid technology advancements, higher user expectation than ever, and incredible competition? So you put the user at the center, and this is an obvious statement, and people talk about this a lot when you're designing. But I'm not talking about the design approach of a one platform. Let's think about the behaviors on that one platform and how we design functionality that delivers on that. What I'm talking about is putting them at the center of the full ecosystem. So when you're making those design decisions, you're actually thinking of all the different spectrums. You're thinking about the different platforms, whether it be the social platforms, whether it be the devices, whether it be the time of day. You're thinking about how they're interacting with their peers. What is the content? How does the content change throughout those different opportunities? Because at the end of the day, this is, I think, the problem. When people think about designing for channels, they think about, okay, my brand is going to interact on the mobile phone. What is the mobile phone strategy? What's the mobile strategy? And you as an organization, you have your mobile group, or you have the one or two few individuals that are responsible, and they're thinking about that. But the problem is, people don't think like that. People don't think about brands as channels. They don't go, okay, here's brand A, and this is brand A's experience on the mobile phone, and this is brand A's advertisement, and this is brand A's retail experience. They think it is a brand. You are a brand, and that's how your brand moves across those different channels. So how do you design to that? How do you think about when you're approaching a channel, how its connectiveness with the others? And really, at the end of the day, how do you move at the speed of culture? Because like I said, things are rapidly changing, and how do you do that in an effective way? So the way we have been working is we live by this thing called responsive philosophy. And that's the ability to respond to multiple contexts so that they're meaningful at every moment, on every device, for every user at any time. So how could you be responsive? This isn't just responsive design for those of you who are familiar with that, which is a tactical element that falls under responsive philosophy of how do you make a website change its format and break at different breakpoints. So where the only thing you're doing is breakpoints in delivering messages. This is how, as a full organization, are you designing and setting yourself up to deliver responsively to the ever-changing market that changes every day. You walk around here and you see all these different startups solving problems in different ways that are changing user behaviors. So how do you set yourself up as a brand so when you're doing your channel strategy that you can execute on that? So we look at it in three different lenses. One, the product and experience, which also encompasses the content. So how do you set up your experience? How do you design an experience that gives you the flexibility to make those changes, and how you deliver narratives and storytelling through that? The organization and process to deliver on that, because if you're not set up internally, how are you going to execute externally, even if you have those great tools from a design and content strategy perspective? And lastly, what's the technology and data that is to support the different two activities? So if we think about product and experience, if you look at the old model, let's say you're going to go, let's design a website for this brand. You go, okay, let's get 3 different templates. These are the core templates that everybody used, so let's start designing from here. And in the organization, you have several key stakeholders. They all have different priorities. And it becomes a battle, and this takes a decent amount of time where you're like, oh, this is important, and ad sales are important, oh no, content, and we want to tell a story this way, and we want to do it this way. And what happens is you finally get to some least common denominator that kind of solves everybody's problems, and you launch it, and then you go, oh, you know what? We have a couple other needs, and you design a couple other templates, because you're like, oh, I need a template that does this, or we want to communicate in this way. You add those templates, and that process continues. You add a couple more templates, and then you add a couple more templates. And then before you know it, you're overwhelmed with these static kind of frameworks of experience of templates. And you have this massive technology debt that makes it very hard for you to move. And after all that work, everything looks the same. The whole internet looks the same, and everybody comes every 2 years or 3 years. It's like, we have to redesign this because the world has changed. It's not solving our problems. Priorities have changed. And if you look at it, everybody has the same problem because their sites all look the same. Like, everybody's like, the right-hand rail. Oh, no one's scrolling. Oh, we need a carousel. We don't need a carousel. And you look at it, and okay, maybe some logos are different and some visuals are different, but it doesn't evolve. If you look at, think about like 2000 to 2010, it's like everything looked the same. Every website looked the same. It was almost a joke when a UX designer went to start creating a page structure, and you're like, why don't we just take that other site, make it black and white, and start putting our own visual aesthetics on it? Because that's what it actually looks like, and that became the frustration. And maybe you advanced a little, but it really wasn't serving the purpose, because in 2 and 3 years, you've already been so far out that you have to do a massive change again, versus adapting and responding to the behaviors that needs to happen. So our philosophy is the template is dead. You don't design experiences that way, especially when you're thinking across multiple channels and platforms on how you actually deliver on it. So if you look at the old model, it's those templates, and the new one is this idea of atomizing content and the experience. So there's elements that are similar to the tactical part of responsive design, but it's really more than that. It's how do you break every single thing down to its smallest element, and that could be repurposed to be brought out. That's everything from your editorial or content strategy, the narratives and storytelling you're going to do. How can you break that down to simple pieces? And everything from the actual experience, the user experience, the elements that help support the content or the user behaviors that you want to get out of them, and thinking about these atomic elements across platforms. What is, maybe you still have TV. What's your storytelling there? What's it going to mean when it's on pre-roll? What's it going to mean when you splice it up and do different things? If you're a publisher, how are you're doing an investigative journalism thing? You have this long piece. What are the small pieces that you could use in different contexts to suck someone in? So how do you break every single thing down? And obviously, you listen and learn. after we break down the pieces into these atomic elements, we look at these different input points to actually put it back together to make it meaningful to the user. We look at the format. Is this a video, long form, short form, whatever it is? The frequency. How often do we expect to actually deliver this to someone? Is it going to be often? Is it going to be once a week? That's an input that will matter on figuring out how to build this back up. Pathing, what we mean by that is, what do we expect the user to do? When they come in anything, in retail, if they come in on mobile, what do we want them to do? Do we want them to move another page? Do we want them to buy something? Do we want them to engage? Do we want them to share? We think about those elements when it gets put out. The location, obviously, if geography has any actual impact on what you're doing, it's an input that's important. The duration. How much time do you expect them to spend at that given moment on that platform at that time? Meaning, it's not always spend as long as you want. Sometimes, actually, say you're a commerce person, really what you want them to do is to buy it. Or maybe someone's in a retail store and they're looking at lipstick, and they want to learn more about the lipstick, and they go online. You don't want them to, you want them to buy it. You want to give them the information they want. Sometimes there's opportunities when someone's waiting online, and maybe you want to just give them that short form, and it's okay for them to bounce out because you've provided them value that they're going to repeat. So thinking about that pathing. Duration. I talked about duration. Time of day. Time of day means something. At different times of day, behaviors change. How can you deliver on that? For example, at 6 p.m., we know people are more lean back, so maybe it's more entertainment. At 12 to 1 a.m., we know people actually is a higher propensity for social to actually start happening. So how does your content, your experience change depending on the time? And platform, obviously, what platform are they on, what breakpoints, that sort of thing. And obviously the user. The more we know about the user, the more we can give that meaningful experience. I think we're having a font problem here, so excuse on that. But the brand values and the interest determine the content. And that content, context, and behavior determine the design and the presentation. And that's what we look for within the inputs. So to break it down simply, what does this actually mean? How does it manifest? Here's an example. Okay, you have your piece of content that goes in the system. It aligns with an interactive framework that can house that content. And then we think about how does it move and respond to different contexts, whether it's a page. Maybe one page, it's this size because it has more meaningful. But within a different context, you could change the size because it knows how to respond to the context. Again, not just breakpoints, but the context. What's the content around it? What's the time of day? What's importance? If you spent all this time creating this amazing feature on the homepage, but someone comes into the article page but has a relationship to the content that you're watching, why do you miss that opportunity for the effort that you put into the homepage for that feature, but it could be smaller because it is secondary to the actual article you're reading? And that can continue and continue. And obviously there's an example on a website, but you can imagine how that element can move through different social platforms, different devices, mobile. So it's really thinking about how you break that down. And then you can build pages back up through these responsive elements. So you're not thinking about the specific template, you're thinking about the element, the inputs, and how it puts it back together in a meaningful way. So here's just like a historical example. So this was Vogue in 2005, and it looked like a lot of other sites. It didn't really have a strategy. It was really a CRM for their magazines at the time. No specific content strategy. The web really wasn't advanced enough to sort of think about that. In 2010, we launched a revised Vogue.com. And for us, we're like, this is great. It's beautiful. It represents the brand a lot more. We're even starting to do some original content, even though a lot of it was still repurposed from the print magazine. And we're like, this is great. We merchandise different type of content in a different way, in a unique way. We're really happy with it. But literally 6 months later, we're like, there's problems here. We're not responding to new ad formats, new ways they want to sell. We have new types of ideas around storytelling from an editorial perspective. The organization was having different needs, and it was so difficult. We're like, almost like we have to redesign this whole thing. So recently relaunched Vogue again. And now it's a totally different perspective. The whole elements, the whole homepage, the article pages, whatever page you land on actually has the ability to change. The homepage can look different tomorrow than it does today. If something's breaking, it can happen. If they have coverage on Fashion Week, they can cover that in a unique way. It's not, how do we get are content that's unique because it's Fashion Week and it's a bigger time in the standard template that we produce content every day. Complete flexibility. And when you create a new element, you're adding to a library for future use. So it's not creating obsolescence in any of the elements because you could reuse and repurpose it. The way you package up content, the way you deliver it, the visual hierarchy, the user experience to path people in the appropriate ways. You know, they come through an article page. Let's move them to another article page, or maybe we should move them back to the home page. We can make all those distinctions very easy. Some of it automated, some of it editorial control, and we can build on it quickly from a technology perspective. We don't feel like we have to move slower the more we do. So if we look at from a different perspective of content, and you think about storytelling, in the olden days, we had one big message. If you're an advertiser, you have this one brand belief, you create this message, and you push the message out to everybody. It doesn't matter who it is. If you're a soda brand, you're pushing it to everybody, and you just keep showing that message again, same message, and that was the effective way you did it. But as I talked about, distribution methods are changing, and you now have a different way to communicate when we think about those inputs to create a meaningful experience. And now you have to figure out how you can do that in different ways. So if you think about it, you have your brand belief, you still have your brand truths, things that are unique to you. And you start looking at things like pop culture. How can your brand resonate from a day-to-day, within culture? Because if you can align to that, you have more propensity to actually be very specific and meaningful to the user. But then you can go even deeper, internet culture. There's things that happen in the internet that is actually abstract from pop culture, and even go more niche to internet subculture. So the more niche you can get, the better and more effective, because you're not playing the same game as the bigger brands that are just kind of doing that one message. You're actually talking to someone. We call this atomization of content. So it's similar to the product experience, how we break the storytelling into the smallest pieces we can to deliver to you across all different platforms, all different channels, in a meaningful way that is very direct, very, very specific. So if you look at Dr. Pepper, for example, olden days, you have a big TV spot, it gets pushed out. And similar to Vogue, this was done, 2005. We started to advance, thinking we should think about things and how to communicate outside. This was a project Band in a Bubble, where we put everybody in a bubble, and they recorded an album, and we released it, and everybody could do it. It was starting to advance it, but it still wasn't talking to it was the uniqueness of people. And now, today, we have millions of different pieces of content. We create content for an ostrich race in middle of America. If you think about it, a Dr. Pepper drinker, they're different. They're not one type of person. You have a punk rock Dr. Pepper drinker, but then you have a corporate person that's a Dr. Pepper drinker. So to think you're going to get one message, and their thing is, one of a kind, 23 flavors. So how do you turn one of a kind, 23 flavors, to actually resonate in a very, very meaningful way across all channels that is consistent? Because remember, people only see brands, they don't see channels to drive their pathing, which is obviously purchase frequency. So to deliver this, you obviously, it's not as simple as let's just design a great experience, let's atomize the content. You actually have to have an organization that aligns, that allows you to respond to that. So if you look at the old org models, this is the org structure for the A-bomb. The thing about this is the world was simpler then. So if you wanted to create the A-bomb, it's very easy to have organizational alignment, because you're doing one thing. You're creating a bomb. And effectiveness it's going to blow up, and that means success for everybody, so it's easier to do that. And you have your skills and your focus, but really the goal is one simple thing. But today, it's not one simple thing, because there's many different ways to reach and communicate on how you interact with the brand. So it's more of a holistic approach, and again, the fonts are weird. Apology for that. But if you think about it, if you look at the outer rings, skills, effective methods, which is process, supportive environment, which is a cultural thing. If you only have two of these things, it fails. If you have great skills and a great process, people are demotivated. If you have a great culture and incredible skills, you think you're rocking as a company, but if you don't have methods, they're ineffective. So what's the point? So you need alignment in all three things. And that comes from creating an organization that is more these SWAT teams, where it's across discipline. So it's not those traditional silos. You don't interact from a day-to-day from a silo. you think about it across disciplines. So that doesn't mean you don't have discipline because you need mentorship and those things, but you don't make it so their day-to-day is about discipline. It's not about who you're reporting up to and how many people you're reporting, report up to you or reporting down. It's how from a day-to-day you're actually worrying about the other discipline and having great creative leadership, and through the organization that you can do those things. So then you don't have just the mobile person in charge of the mobile channel only focus on mobile. They're actually thinking about the atomization of the elements that's going to live on mobile and the website and out of home or wherever else it's going to live. And you need a space that encourages this. And this isn't just about maximizing, square footage. It's really thinking about how you organize people. Do you organize them by discipline, or does that put them in box? Do you put them in those pods? This is a space we actually designed for Cosmo. We worked with Hearst designing Cosmo.com, and quickly realized, through a lot of the other publishers we worked with, if you're not set up from a physical interaction standpoint, you can't actually deliver on the vision. So it doesn't matter how great the redesign is. Without that, it's ineffective. So this isn't about like the great, awesome floors and the exposed brick and the swanky office with the ping pong table. This is about actually thinking about the UX and the experience of how people are going to interact, similar to the UX and experience when you're designing a website. The same rigor has to go into that. And lastly, technology and data. Obviously, without technology, it's hard to support this in a technology world, and that's looking at everything from workflow. How could you have it do that heavy lifting? How can you be personal? How can give you more data to understand behaviors and emotions? Obviously, it's no rocket science to say that you need data and you can gather, listen, and inform, but it's what do you do with it? How does it give you the competitive advantage? Oftentimes, people forget that data can inform actual creativity. So how does it make you more creative, not just tell you what to do? So thinking about how you use data in different ways. The traditional thing is product stories and data. Is it good? Let's make small things. But it's really data as a starting point to facilitate those creative things. For example, this is something we did for Burger King, where we manage their social channels, we do a lot of their digital activities, and we noticed there was a problem. Within the social insights we were getting, we saw there was lots of negative feedback that people wanted this product that used to be in the stores. And the solve wasn't, hey, let's just think about how we communicate on the social media channel and reply to people and make them feel good about it. It was actually like, this is a product thing. How do we get a product in a very quick way to respond to the people that want this product in a QSR, which is a big challenge. How do you get a product in a fast food restaurant quickly? And we launched chicken fries to great success. It was really an emotional insight that allowed us to respond quickly. Or if you think it from a platform standpoint, features and optimizations is the same thing. Similar to the Vogue example, we launched the LA Times. And this page is fully atomized. Everything from the storytelling. If the editors or the writers want to tell a story in an interesting way, they can pull on components or relationships, or it can scroll and it can change what you're scrolling based on the context. I talk about different type of context for inputs. I'll give you a quick example. Most people make the mistake to think, if you're looking at this piece of content, the best thing to do is find the relationship to that content. But you're forgetting the input of culture or subculture or other components. So if you're looking at the Dodgers blog and something big happens that is, affecting culture, like we go to war. Let's go dark for a second. What's more important, another piece of Dodgers content that someone came straight to the article page, or that it's breaking, we just announced that we're going to war. So we can dynamically take that context and move someone straight into the homepage that has all the big editorial coverage of war. We can make those determinations. We can think about relationships and the site and the experience in different ways. But lastly, you got to consider the technology debt, because I'm talking about being responsive and effective and how you can make changes quickly and often. But the one problem is every time you add a line of code, there's some debt that happens there. So technology supports to make things easier, but you really have to think about the ROI on every time you do something. What's the effectiveness and what's the trade-off that I'm going to have when I'm doing that? So obviously it's a complex world. How do you respond to it? A lot of people say, less is more. Less but better. We've heard that before. We kind of go with this more but simpler, because the world is complex, and you can't. And when people say, let's make it simple, and every meeting someone goes, let's make it simple, that's not very easy, because it's a lot of effort. and you need to do a lot of things. It's not just remove things. Sometimes that's the answer, but when you're thinking about across channels, how you're going to deliver across channels, it's really more, because you want to create the framework to be very meaningful. But the problem is, it can't be complex. So it has to be simple. It has to be simpler. It has to be simpler for the user, so it's transparent. You know, a user shouldn't see, or consumer, reader, whatever you want to call them, they shouldn't see operational problems. They shouldn't see your business problems. That should be transparent to them. So how could it be simpler for them? So it's meaningful across all channels, so they think of you as a brand. And how could it be simpler for you to execute it? How you organize yourself? What's the culture you're supporting? What is the frameworks and design decisions you're making that's going to make it simpler, so you don't have the problem where you launch this big experience in 1 or 2 years. You have to do the exact same deja vu process and get to the exact same place that by the time you launch it, you've already moved. So I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
If you're willing, we can take one question.
Oh yeah, sorry. I didn't leave time for questions, but they're going to be generous with me.
Anybody got one quick question?
Can you talk a little bit about how you use that data to get clients to make quick decisions? I mean, a lot of times we have these ideas of, here, go do this is what the data's saying, but the clients just don't.
Yeah, I think as a creative agency or creative people, I think there's always a challenge of how you sell your ideas through. Data for us is a powerful way to actually do that. You know, there's many times where it's a challenge. We hammer hard. You know, we keep pushing, and obviously it's a compromise sometimes, and not that you always want to make compromises. But I think oftentimes I've found if the data is true and you're not using it to manipulate, you know, your perspective, but it's really in there, like the chicken fries example, it was very, very obvious. Even though it's very unprecedented to get a product in a market that quick, it usually wins. So, I mean, there's no system that I can easily say this is how you win over, you know, someone's perspective. It's obviously hard to change people's mind. That's a hard thing always to do. But I think when it's real human truths, whether it be behavioral, emotional, I think the case kind of plays for itself. Any other quick questions as I walk off the stage?
Actually, yeah, we're gonna leave it there. Dan,
we're gonna wrap
thank
it
you very
up.
much.
Thank you.